our first guest, Julia Aziz. Welcome to Mom Talk Radio, Julia.
Thank you, Mary.
So, Julia, you have written a book called Lessons of Labor, One Woman's Self-Discovery Through Birth and Motherhood. We all hear horror stories about labor, but you wrote a book about it. Tell us why you wrote the book. What was your inspiration?
My inspiration really was my first experience with childbirth, and realizing that whereas I had been told a lot about kind of the physical nature of birth and maybe pain management in that way, I hadn't realized the mental and emotional and sort of spiritual struggle of giving birth. And so I was really blown away by that and saw it as a metaphor for some of those same challenges I'd felt in the rest of my life. So I wrote it to kind of, and also in becoming a new mom, there were so many challenges, especially after that first baby was born. And I could really see how, what I was struggling with in the pain and uncertainty of childbirth was so similar to the struggles I had in regular life. So it's my story, but it's also, I'd say, sort of a process for how to maybe look at our life stories or our birth stories as tools for learning.
Right. And you actually have background. You're a licensed clinical social worker and a hospice spiritual counselor as well. So do you think it gave you that different perspective or an edge over, let's say, me, who doesn't have that background in spiritual counseling?
I'd say that that's generally the way I look at life in general, and from my training and what brought me into doing that kind of work in the first place. I feel like I'm a student of life, and that was one of the most intense kind of human experiences. So it felt monumental in that way. I think it's really a rite of passage for women who go through that, and so I wanted to kind of explore that in that way, instead of just, did the birth go the way I wanted it to go? Did, my newborn experience, did that go the way? I think a lot of times we focus on, did you have a good birth experience? Did you have a bad one? Did your baby sleep or not sleep? Instead of, whoa, like, how am I handling this, and what could I learn from that?
Right. So, would you say it's your birth, is it your birth story? Is it tips for moms? Is it more of just what happened to you or what moms get? Like you said, is it something about what's the genre of the book, I guess?
Yeah, it's more of a memoir / self-help, I would say. It's split into 4 sections. I have 3 children, and I also had a miscarriage my very first pregnancy. So each section is for a different birth or that miscarriage, and there are short chapters in each section, and at the beginning of each is an excerpt from that birth story. So kind of going through a whole section, I'm slowly telling the story of that labor, and then I will introduce sort of a lesson like a life lesson from that experience, and then connect that to usually kind of what was going on as a new mom for me. So it's kind of there's 2 storylines going on, like the birth storyline and then just kind of the new mom stories. So it's my experience, but it's also kind of just a process of reflection.
Right. Well, that sounds great, because actually when you look at the big picture, obviously the new mom and obviously motherhood goes on. The birth part is really just the blip on the radar, on the timeline,
Exactly.
So the postnatal is where you really need the support and the help. So this sounds great.
Definitely. Yeah. And that was a big reason why I wrote it, was that I think, especially for a first-time pregnant woman, there's so much focus on childbirth, and it's like, and then you'll have the baby. And you don't realize what a huge, huge change that's going to be, and how much, how much goes on in that, year or 2 years or however many, it takes. It's a big adjustment.
I just remember the first few weeks just being like gobsmacked. What am I doing?
Yeah,
they sent me home with this thing,
Right, so right. Whereas the labor can't last more than a few days. That just keeps going on and on.
Exactly. So you talk about reclaiming the self in motherhood. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think that becoming a mom is such a huge identity shift, that role can be so large. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I can't speak for dads, but I know as a mom, like the love and protectiveness that we have for our children is so sort of awesome that I think it can sometimes take over for a while, and we leave parts of ourselves behind in service of this role. And so I think part of what I've found over time to be really important is how to reclaim parts of my identity that were there before children and integrate them in a new way to who I am now, instead of just like completely getting rid of them, because at some point those things come back and they're like, hey, this, you know, freedom of youth kind of wants some place to play, you know,
right,
and
to thrive.
How can you can't go back to being who you were or living a lifestyle that you used to have, but it is important to be all of who you are, I think, as a woman, and not be wholly defined as a mother, if that makes sense.
Right. Oh no, absolutely. I completely agree. That's great, because then I have a little one, but I have a teenager. So, you know, it goes fast, and all of a sudden I'm looking at, he's getting college letters and he's only a sophomore in high school. So I'm thinking one day I'm going to be back to, you know, just my husband and I in the house, and, you know, you have to be true to, you know, keep, like you said, keep that, or rediscover that part of yourself that wants to play. So that's a great term. Thank you so much, Julia, for joining us. And your website is lessonsoflabor.com. Where else is the book available?
It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and it can also be ordered through any local bookstore as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us on Mom Talk Radio, and best of luck.